Well, hello everyone. It's been a while since we've done a book review, hasn't it? I think the last one was in March, for a book, to be clear, a book. And the last story review was back in, I think, April with Dark Vendetta. Um, Technically March is the last book review, given that was Shadows of Mindor. Dark Vendetta's a short story, and I think one of them, like the magazines or something. So, you know, technically that's not a book, but I'm still going to count it as I still count it as part of the book reviews. Anyway, it's been a little while since I've gone through a book because it was just so worn out after reading Last of the Jedi, and I really shouldn't have got jumped straight into Shadows of Mindor. That wasn't my plan, but I all of a sudden just wanted to get through Chronal stuff. Um, so yeah. Um, but I've now started Coruscant Nights, which is a book series I've been wanting to get through for quite a while now. So I've now started Coruscant Nights 1, Jedi Twilight. And I've just finished chapter 1. Now, I don't really have a whole lot to say on this chapter. Um, the first, we start off with a bit of a description of, the lower levels, which it was quite nice to go back to, especially after reading Last of the Jedi. If you don't know, in book 3 of Last of the Jedi, we go even below the surface of Coruscant, and we even see like the lowest of levels on Coruscant. So it's quite nice to kind of go back there. Um, and we get to kind of see a bit of a different side to the lower levels. In Underworld, in Last of the Jedi Underworld, it was kind of felt like it was in a lot of disrepair. Here, it still feels like it's still somewhat functional, but still really difficult so far. That's what it looks like. So we're kind of getting a little bit of a different view on the underworld, of course, on the very lowest levels. So it was a bit of a surprise. I knew it was going to take place on Coruscant. I didn't know we were going to the lower levels, so that was quite a nice surprise. Um, but the amount of times I had to Google up words, on just the first page alone was a bit, um, especially since coming off Last of the Jedi, that has quite a lot of instances where I had to do that, but what, not quite as frequently, and those books were a lot shorter as well. Um, and I think it's a little bit more frustrating now that Google, in their genius, decided to make the Google AI overview the default thing that pops up when you search words. So now it's even harder for me to actually find definitions. It doesn't just bring up the page and lists all the definitions. Now it gives you a description of what the definitions are, and then it gives you a list. So yeah, it makes it infinitely harder now to read, and I'm so glad I got Mindor done before Google did that. But yeah, it's really frustrating now to get through. It's much because it's just much more time consuming. Because usually I just put it in the Google search bar, and I wouldn't have to enter anything in. I wouldn't have to actually pull up a search. I'd only have to do it if the answer that came up either didn't show in full or wasn't necessarily in the right context. But now I have to do a full search each time, which makes it so much more time consuming, um, and a lot more annoying to do as well. But yeah, that's sorry for that little side tangent. But yeah, it's quite nice to get a bit more of a description of the underworld, of course, and get a little bit of a different description. And then we pick up with Evan Peel. And I have one complaint with this chapter, which is it keeps referring to Evan Peel as Evan. Not much of a problem. That wouldn't be much of a problem if his name wasn't spelt Even. There were quite a few instances where it just only referred, for most of the chapter, it only refers to him as Evan. And because it's spelt like the word even, there were quite a few times where I accidentally read it as even, and that to go back and reread it. And even when it first brought up his name, and it was brought up his name, it was at the very start of a sentence. It said Evan Peel was like on the one or something, and I read it as even Peel was, as if it was, it's referring to Evan Peel being on the run. I knew he was talking about, but it was still a bit, mm, and I think maybe it should have just referred, instead of always referring to him as Evan Peel, instead of always referring to him as Evan, always refer to him as Peel here, unless the full name, adding the full name to add a bit of flavour into the reading experience. I think that's a complaint I have. It doesn't look like, from what I'm a know, Evan does die in this book. Which also, by the way, thank you, thank you TCW for killing him off in the Clone Wars when in this book he's alive after Order 66. Really, Clone Wars really shouldn't be canon to Legends because of little continuity errors like this. Well, in some cases, not little at all. But anyway, but yeah, we're given a bit of a description of who Peel is. Like I know I know of the character, but I don't really know much about his characters, and it was quite interesting some of the stuff they brought up. He seems to be a more aggressive Jedi. It talks about how he's someone that never really shies away from a fight, and he definitely seems to have a little bit of pride, or when it comes to his fighting. Yet he is still level-headed. He doesn't get consumed in that pride. He still is a Jedi, and he makes practical, sensible decisions, especially in the periods he's in now. And he knows that he's in the periods where he can't keep using the Force, he can't outwardly fight, and has to restrict himself out and not help in case it exposes him. And there's little moments like that give you little ideas of what his character is like. But we still don't really know. I'm sure he's a lot more expanded in other stories. But it was quite interesting to learn a little bit more about Evan Peel, and it's definitely some of the text feels like it's being written from his perspective, even though there's never any clarification from it for it being written in his perspective. And it definitely seems like it, because there were some times it was listing off some of the battles he's been in. It was had he not, as if it was saying it from his perspective. So yeah, it was quite interesting. But there really isn't a whole lot to talk about this chapter. We're basically being given an idea of who Evan Peel is while he's on the run from stormtroopers 2 months after Order 66. And he makes his way into a little spice den, and is able to find a half hidden entrance that leads to a casino, and he tries to make his way to a turbo lift that doesn't work, which he was expecting, and he started to use the Force to lift himself up through to lift his, I assume the platform, but he just said himself up through the tube. The stormtroopers are able to catch up. They open fire, and sorry about that. And they open fire, and it kind of the shot kind of, I guess, seals off the tube as the tube connects to the ceiling, and it kind of seals it off. It's not very well explained, I don't think. And then they shoot the bottom of the tube, so that starts melting. So that melts away. Evan's trapped. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, I don't think. They don't really go into a lot of detail as to like how the tube is, as to how the tube is functioning. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't make a lot of sense, honestly, thinking about it. Maybe I just didn't understand it properly, but to me it's okay. From what, especially with what it said, apparently, assuming it's Evan Peel is lifting the lift of the tube, the actual lift bit, it sounded like that they shot it so the lift bit gets McCarve gets them welded in place at the ceiling, but then the text makes it clear that Evan was able to stop it from going any further. Just before just before it would have been welded in place by the shot. So it's really confusing. I don't quite get what it's trying to say there. But yeah, then Evan is finally decides that there's no other way he can escape. He can't go up. He can't go down for some reason that's not explained properly. He draws his lightsaber and he jumps out, and he deflects the bolts, and he has to start making a decision of how to actually get out of here, because he can't just go past the troopers and go the way he came. I think that was all. What does it say? But to flee into the darkness of the ancient chamber in his condition would be futile. The troopers would cut him down like a ripe yaii stalk if he turns his back. No, there was only one way out, through them. That's what the book says. Um, so because he's not had a lot of nutrition, he's not has a lot of sleep, so it's not in his peak condition at the moment. So he has to go through the troopers, and it ends with him taking a stance and letting the force be one with him. And that's where we end the chapter. Next chapter, and this is kind of a bit exciting because I read Shadows of Mindor, and I knew this character would be in this book, going into this book. But Nick Rostu is back for this book. I haven't read Shatterpoint, so I still don't have the context of what it was of his character in that. But still, it's quite nice to see that Nick is going to be in here. He's quite a good character in Shadows of Mindor. Um, it was both very grounded and very funny, I think, from what I remember. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see uh Nick's almost moving us back, if I remember that correctly. Again, it's been a couple months since I went through Mindor, so I don't fully remember the details. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see Nick in here. But yeah, I enjoyed the first chapter of the book. I do think there were some bits where it could have been a lot better. It could have been explained so much better why Evan couldn't escape through the tube. Um, Again, maybe I just read it wrong. Maybe I just wasn't paying enough attention to the text. Let me look at it. I'm on the wrong page. The others followed his gaze. One, a sergeant, judging by the green markings on his armour, raised his blaster. It was a Blastech SE-14, a pistol that packed the highly concentrated beam barrel of an energy rifle into a weapon half the size. Evan knew that the crystal steel tubing couldn't stop the burst of charged subatomic particles. He accelerated his ascent. Just before he reached the ceiling, the leading trooper fired, but not at Evan above him. Too late, Evan realised the other's tactic. The blast struck the tube at the juncture between the ceiling and the lift, melting and fusing it together into an impassable mass. Evan barely managed to stop his ascent in time. A second later, the trooper fires again, this time turning the tube's base below the Jedi's feet into molten slag. Yeah, it still doesn't make sense to me, reading that again. That doesn't make sense to me at all. Because to my understanding, the tube is going through the ceiling. So yeah, that doesn't make sense at all. It doesn't make any sense at all to me. If anyone actually understands what that's trying to say, let me know in the comments, because I don't get what it's trying to say at all. It doesn't make sense to me. But yeah, I enjoy the chapter. I enjoyed the chapter. It was nice to learn a bit more about Evan Peel. Even though I'm now just calling him Evan, and I was com- complaining about him being called Evan in the text. But to be fair, the pronunciation is different from the spelling. It's not like how, Evan is in our in our world. We usually spell Evan as Evan, not Even. So yeah, in the text it's more of a problem in pronunciation, not so much. But yeah, I think it was nice to learn more about Evan Peel. Um, but yeah, the actual confrontation between him and the stormtroopers could have been explained a lot, and I do mean a lot better. Because that tube scene, to me, made sense at first when reading it, but doing this review, it's, oh yeah, that does not make any sense at all. So yeah, I have no idea what it's referring to in that scene. Um, It's going to be interesting to see how Jax Pavan plays into this, because I know he's one of the. I think he's the main character of this book series, as far as I'm aware. Um, so it's going to be interesting to see how Nick Ross who plays into that with Jax. Um, so yeah. Oh, and Evan. Um, according to according to the summary at the back, it seems like Jax Pavan is gonna take a mission. Is gonna complete Evan Peel's mission. From it doesn't say Evan Peel anywhere on the back, but I assume no, it's Old Masters Evan Peel. And it wouldn't surprise me from Nick Ross, who's the one that tells him about the mission that Evan was trying to complete. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where this book goes. Not really got an idea of where it's going to be leading. If anything, the summary gives more of an idea of where this book's going. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where this goes. So thank you all for watching, and goodbye.